I'm going to kill them all. I'm the new Hitler. He's basically saying he's the new Hitler. What is that? He's either a monster or a monster and a man-child.
What is going on, everybody? And listen, this panel right here is one of the most honest and most explosive conversations about this Iran war you're going to see on mainstream television. Cenk Uygur calling Trump a baboon who got bribed by the ad family and manipulated by Netanyahu into doing exactly what Obama and Biden refused to do. Glenn Greenwald drawing the Iraq 2003 lie parallel in real time. And Piers Morgan making the observation that should make every American genuinely uncomfortable that a war with Iran is being produced like a primetime reality television show complete with Hollywood videos, White House memes, and an 8 p.m. Eastern deadline like it is the season finale of The Apprentice. And the whole world is just sitting there waiting to see if the bombs actually drop. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up because on Lucas Speaks, we do not let this level of political theater go without a full breakdown. Now, let's get into it.
Is using this bargaining tool, which is using this blackmail tool, the economic tool, that they would somehow, that we're supposed to let them do that and then potentially have nuclear weapons and let them blackmail the world again?
No, I don't believe there was. I don't believe there was an impending threat of nuclear weapons in Iran. I think that was a totally misleading reading of their situation and flies completely in the face of what we were told happened after the 12-day war. So I think that this was a genuine desire by the Israelis to have a regime change in Iran, and they persuaded Donald Trump to join in. That's why Antony Blinken said they tried to get Biden to do it. They tried to get Obama to do it. They both said no, and Israel did not attack. This time they got third time lucky. As Marco Rubio said, the Americans got involved because they were told another country was going in and they knew that there would be retaliation, so we better get in first. It came out of the Secretary of State's mouth. So the beauty of this whole war, if there can be such a thing, is the clarity coming out of people's mouths. They will be judged accordingly. Let me bring Cenk back in here. I keep going back to that Rubio moment because to me, that is at the core of this war. I think Trump got bamboozled into doing this by Netanyahu, who made 8 visits to America in the build-up to this. And we saw J.D. Vance say similar things only last week.
Yeah. So there's 3 different factors with Trump and the Israelis. Number one, the Adelson family alone has given Trump over $300 million in campaign contributions. So anyone saying that Trump is not affected by $300 million lives on a different planet. So they literally bribed him. That's legally possible in America. Miriam Adelson is an Israeli. She's the one who flew out Jonathan Pollard in a private jet to congratulate him back to Israel, gave him a hero's welcome. So these people are not for our country. They're the opposite, right? On top of that, let's be honest, there might be blackmail. But let's go past that. And they did. And Netanyahu came and talked to him 8 different times and whispered sweet nothings into his ear. And he said, oh, you're going to be a hero. You're going to conquer the whole world, Donald. And you know what? We're going to do it anyway. You'll be a spectator to history. That's a direct quote that they used. So you better not be weak. And the thing is, guys, Piers, the one thing I can't agree with you on is Trump is a baboon. I mean, he's so stupid. It's like talking to a child. I mean, if you told me, oh, you're going to be a spectator to history, you better attack Iran before we do, I'd be like, shut up and get out of the American White House. And but Trump's like, oh, okay, Daddy, am I going to be big and powerful? So I can't stand the guy, and I can't stand talking as if he's a rational person.
Look, honestly, when you call Trump a baboon, you're kind of falling into his rhetorical trap of getting in the gutter with him. And I don't think
What is this, Piers? Well, I mean, can you agree that he's a stupid man-child? Can you at least agree on that?
No, I don't think he's a stupid man.
I mean, what is this screaming into the abyss? I'm going to kill them all. I'm the new Hitler. He's basically saying he's the new Hitler. What is that? He's either a monster or a monster and a man-child.
I find these posts reprehensible. But Donald Trump is not a stupid man. I can assure you of that. He's won the White House twice.
Are you crazy?
Well,
he's the dumbest guy we've ever had in office.
Well, he's won the White House twice. He's not stupid.
Yeah, that's why I can't stand the corporate Democrats.
He's not stupid.
I mean, to be fair, you're right. I mean, the only people dumber than Donald Trump are the Democratic leadership that keep losing to him.
Okay.
Let's run as elitists. Let's run as pro-corporate and let's embrace Dick Cheney.
All right.
Jesus.
But I don't think he's stupid. But I do think his foreign policy generally actually has been one of his stronger points until this. This makes no sense to me. No, it hasn't made sense from day one.
He has no strong points. His his foreign policy has been a disaster. So let's get back to the main issue here. So he said he was against the wars. You're absolutely right about that, especially against Middle Eastern wars. And he said he was worried that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were going to take us into World War III, okay? And now what do we have? Ben-Gvir threatening nukes. And by the way, if you haven't heard, China and Pakistan have said that if Israel nukes Iran, they will nuke Israel. So here we are on the precipice of a nuclear holocaust because this baboon is in office and he's like, oh, Bibi, how can I make you happy? Can you please give me more money? Am I going to be a hero, Bibi? I can't stand this guy. And doing the exact opposite of what he promised. Okay. The exact opposite. And one more thing a point that Glenn made that is really important. So Russia goes and destroys their army and their treasure in Ukraine. Now we're going to destroy our treasure. We spent $300 million on the rescue alone. It was a brilliant operation, but $300 million. We're spending $1 to $2 billion a day. So both Russia and the U.S. are destroying themselves in these totally needless wars, and China is laughing their ass off. How did they get this lucky that we're wasting our treasure and our military on wars for other countries? It's insanity. Let's go compete with China and India economically. Stop this military madness. Get someone who's an American and who's a decent person back in charge of America.
Okay, let me bring Ryan back in here. I found a quote from retired Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Van Lindingham, who said on PBS, threatening to bomb every bridge and power plant in Iran in itself is a war crime, not just reckless talk, a crime. Why? Because terrorizing a civilian population through rhetoric violates the law of war, and the law of war is US law. So that seems pretty clear there, that actually this kind of rhetoric can have very serious real-world consequences for Donald Trump.
Yeah, so a lot of this is a bargaining position. It's a lot of leverage that Trump is getting. And when it comes to actually targeting these structures, like a flew combat in Afghanistan, and there's a rule of engagement that you go through for every release, and you do everything you can to mitigate damage to civilians in the area. But if you look at some of these plants that have been struck so far, like Pars Energy Plant, Sharif University, Pars is basically powering the ballistic missile program for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So that makes it a legitimate target. Sharif University is a nerve center, a data center, where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has built and designed their missiles and their drones. And what I hear on the panel, too, is a lot of people being triggered by Trump. And I think that's what happens when someone with a backbone comes in and says, no, you know what, we're going to stand up to evil. And if you don't stand up to that evil, you're kind of like that person.
But what if, as Tucker Carlson said, what if in standing up to evil, you start to sound evil yourself? I mean, that is...
Well, maybe you do have to fight fire with fire. I mean, you're going up against a terrorist regime. Yeah, but that's the problem, isn't it?
I've got a real problem with that. You know, I've always, I've said this many times, I don't want to bore people, but I come from a lot of military in my family, right? And they're horrified about this because there's supposed to be a moral code. I'm sure you abided by it when you served.
Absolutely.
I know for a fact Rob did. Right, he's been on some of the biggest missions in American modern military history, and there's a strict moral code that abides along the way with these guys, right? It's what makes the American military one of the finest in history. It's what makes the British military fine. The moment you lose that, the moment you abandon all pretense at morality or being a superior moral force, and you just decide to fight evil with evil, and you fight people threatening to annihilate you by annihilating the entire country, you lose me.
I think he's threatening to annihilate the IRGC and the regime. I don't think he's threatening to annihilate the entire country.
Maybe you should do his posts.
That's pretty clear, right? I mean,
from
what we can see.
You're being very forgiving, but maybe you should be his digital producer because that's not what he posted.
Well, I'll be the person that reads the second part of his Truth Social post. I mean, it's pretty clear right there that he's just talking about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. 47 years ago, the Islamic Revolution happened and brought in a terrorist regime run by radical Islamic clerics who want a nuclear weapon. So my question to the panel is, yeah, it'd be nice if we don't have to do anything.
That's actually not
I would
true.
prefer that we're not in war. It would be great, Cenk, if we could not have to deal with this situation and we could just all go on with our lives, run our businesses, make money. That'd be great. But to me, you're coming across as someone who's putting a blindfold on and walking towards a cliff, and you're perfectly fine with that threat. And someone's like, hey, there's a cliff up there.
Yeah,
and you're like,
that's
yeah,
what you
but
sound like to me.
It's nice out today, so we're just going to keep walking towards. cliff, and that cliff is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
What happens,
so not
Ryan?
only nuclear weapons,
Ryan,
just take
what
nuclear
happens?
weapons off the table.
Okay, but Ryan,
Totally
what
untrue.
happens? What happens, Ryan? Look, there are many people that share your view that the Iranians had to be dealt with, and that Trump's a trash talker, and he's
The IRGC
and he's
had to be dealt
negotiating
with,
and so on.
not the
But let me
Iranians.
ask you, Ryan, a specific question. What happens if the Iranians call it?
21%.
What happens if the Iranians call his bluff? If 8 p.m. comes and goes tonight, Trump does not wipe out the whole country and is then looking, as I said earlier, like the emperor with no clothes. The guy that threatened to do all this stuff, and then they called his bluff and he didn't do it. That's the problem. You can exaggerate when you're selling a building in New York City. You can pile them high, right? You can exaggerate a lot of things when you're president, actually. You can trash talk your rivals, or you can trash talk Hollywood people when they die, whatever. That has no real world level of consequence, other than people might find it disagreeable. But when you do this and you don't act on it, he is relying on the Iranian regime caving. I don't think that ideologically they will do that, because they are basically nihilists. They've already said publicly in the last few hours, we don't care if we die. We'll die if we have to. And I'm sure they mean it.
Of course.
So what happens if his bluff gets called?
Well, I think it's a fair point. I mean, some of the choice words, the words probably could have been stated differently. I think you bring up a fair point there. However, in warfare, there's also deception. So if you're deceiving the enemy, you're doing warfare correct. And so if 8 p.m. comes tonight and the bombs don't drop on specific facilities, then it'll drop somewhere else. And Trump will pivot somewhere else and use our military in a moral way to start to systematically destroy the IRGC's ability to fund themselves. And we saw Karj Island get hit this morning, late last night. And so they took out military infrastructure there while not targeting the oil infrastructure. So there's a strategic 4D chess plan. So again, pivoting and adapting can happen even when this claim has been made by the president.
Well, the thing is, we're going to find out. I mean, somebody said to me last night, I first got to know Trump when I appeared on his Celebrity Apprentice show. And someone said to me last night... Can I just add
one thing, Piers?
Yeah.
So I think there's a narrative out there that everybody's blaming Israel for everything, and it comes across as a mainstream corporate news talking point to me. But if you look back at the 80s, President Trump has an interview where he says Iran needs to be bombed. They need to be taken out. They're a dangerous regime.
There's no question. There's no question he has said that before, but there's also no question, because Marco Rubio spelled it out for us on camera, that the incentive for America to get involved this time was because the Israelis said we're going to attack.
Obviously, Israel has an incentive for us to do this. That's obvious. That's clear. They benefit from this. However, America benefits a lot as well.
But the problem, my problem.
Sponsor of terror.
No, we don't.
The point I was going to make was, having appeared on The Apprentice, someone said to me last night, "This is like watching The Apprentice." This is my problem with the way Trump is conducting this war. War is not a game. It's not a reality show. And when people are waking up for the new installment from Donald Trump about the Iran war, and almost when you add all the memes that the White House has been putting out and the Hollywood-style video stuff and so on, none of it sits easily with me, because there is nothing worse in the world than war. But as you know,
Piers, I agree.
And as Rob knows better than anybody, wars are about as real as life and death get, right? And the idea that the whole thing is treated like a kind of reality show sits really badly with me.
Even made it prime time, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Prime
that's
time
my
is
point.
when he set the time for it.
That's my point. It's like it's all what you would do if you're promoting a reality TV show. Because that's Trump's background, it sits even more uneasily, and I wish he wouldn't do it like this. I think there are different ways to do it which are more respectful.
There are. I think you're right. There could be a more respectful way to do this. But at the end of the day, Piers, you know better than anybody that this is a propaganda war. I mean, look at the IRGC's propaganda. This battle also plays out in the media. And so I think President Trump is fighting it in the media as well.
Okay. Well, we will find out. Thank you very much to my panel. I really appreciate it.
So let us talk about what this panel just laid out. Because across the disagreements and the crosstalk and Kink calling Trump a baboon, there were several genuinely important observations made that cut through the noise and deserve to be examined completely. Let us start with the bamboozled argument. Because Cenk made it with energy, but Piers grounded it with the most important piece of documented evidence available. Marco Rubio said on camera that America got involved because Israel told the United States it was going to attack Iran anyway, and America feared the retaliation against American interests that would follow. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the Secretary of State of the United States explaining the decision-making process that sent American soldiers to war in his own words on camera. Anthony Blinken confirmed that Netanyahu tried the same play with Obama. Obama said no. Israel did not attack. Netanyahu tried the same play with Biden. Biden said no, Israel did not attack. Netanyahu tried with Trump. Trump said yes. Third time lucky. And Cenk's point about the financial infrastructure around that yes is documented and devastating. The Ad family alone gave Trump over $300 million in campaign contributions. Miriam Ad, an Israeli citizen. She flew Jonathan Pard, a convicted spy who stole American military secrets for Israel, back to Israel on a private jet and gave him a hero's welcome. The idea that $300 million in campaign contributions from an Israeli citizen does not influence American foreign policy requires a level of naivety that the documented record simply does not support. That is not anti-Semitism. That is the documented financial reality of American political fundraising applied to the specific decision that sent America to war. The war crime rhetoric point is the one that the military panelists dismissed too quickly and that deserves serious legal weight. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Van Leiningham stated on PBS that threatening to bomb every bridge and power plant in Iran is itself a war crime under the law of war. Not just reckless talk, a crime. Because terrorizing a civilian population through rhetoric violates the law of war. And the law of war is American law. The military panelists' response was to argue that Trump was actually just targeting the IRGC and that the specific facilities struck had military connections. But that response addresses what was actually struck, not what was threatened. Trump threatened to wipe out Iranian civilization. He threatened to send them back to the Stone Age. He set an 8 p.m. Eastern deadline for destroying civilian infrastructure. Those are the statements being cited as potentially criminal. And the argument that we should read the second part of his Truth Social post as clarifying that he only meant the IRGC is the most charitable possible interpretation of statements that on their face describe civilizational annihilation. Legal standards do not operate on the most charitable possible interpretation. They operate on what was actually said and what a reasonable person would understand it to mean. The nuclear precipice moment is the one that should have dominated the entire conversation and was almost buried under the baboon debate. Cenk named it clearly. China and Pakistan have said that if Israel uses nuclear weapons against Iran, they will respond with nuclear weapons against Israel. That is a nuclear escalation chain from a regional conflict to a global nuclear exchange that involves 3 nuclear-armed states: Pakistan, China, and Israel in a sequence that begins with one decision by one Israeli prime minister. This is not theoretical. This is the documented stated position of 2 nuclear powers. And the man who is supposedly preventing this scenario by conducting this war is the same man who is threatening to send Iran back to the Stone Age in primetime television-style posts while the global markets try to figure out whether he is serious. The people saying Trump is preventing a nuclear Iran need to explain how the current trajectory where Pakistan and China have explicitly stated nuclear red lines connected to Israeli conduct is safer than the JCPOA that was working before Trump tore it up. The China is laughing observation is the one that should permanently end the America First branding of this war. Cenk made the point that Mirandi has made from inside Iran and that multiple strategic analysts have made from outside. Russia is destroying its army and its treasury in Ukraine. America is destroying its treasury in Iran 1 to 2 billion per day. Both superpowers are exhausting themselves in regional conflicts that serve other interests. China is watching. China has the largest strategic petroleum reserves in the world specifically because they anticipated exactly this scenario. China locked in Russian energy at deeply discounted prices when Europe cut Russia off after Ukraine. China is not spending $1 on this war. China is not losing a soldier. China is sitting back watching its 2 primary strategic competitors drain their military capacity, their financial reserves, their diplomatic credibility, and their domestic political cohesion simultaneously in wars that have nothing to do with the actual competition for 21st century economic and technological dominance. If you genuinely believe in America first, if you genuinely want America to lead the world in the coming century, the question you have to answer is how spending $1 to $2 billion a day in Iran helps America compete with China in artificial intelligence, semiconductor manufacturing, green energy, and the other technological domains that will determine which country leads the world in 50 years. The answer is it does not. It actively damages American competitive position while China watches and waits. The bluff question is the one that Piers pressed most effectively and that the military panelists could not answer honestly. If 8 p.m. comes and goes and the bombs do not drop. If Trump sets a prime-time deadline and then does not act on it, what happens to American credibility? The answer the panelists gave was military deception is a valid tactic and Trump will just pivot somewhere else. That answer is correct as far as it goes, but it does not address the specific strategic problem Piers identified. When you publicly set a specific deadline, 8 p.m. Eastern, for a specific action, and that deadline passes without the action occurring, you have not successfully deceived your enemy. You have demonstrated to your enemy and to every other actor watching that your deadlines are performative rather than operational. And once that demonstration has been made, every subsequent deadline and every subsequent threat carries less credibility. The boy who cried 8 p.m. Eastern problem compounds with every announcement. And Iran, a country that has been studying American foreign policy for 40 years specifically to understand exactly this dynamic, is well positioned to calculate how many performative deadlines it takes before the threats become fully negotiable. The reality show observation is the most important thing Piers Morgan said in that entire segment, and it deserves to be the frame through which this entire conflict is understood. He appeared on The Apprentice. He knows how Trump produces content and what he watched in the build-up to the Iran strikes, the Hollywood-style White House videos, the memes, the specific primetime Eastern deadline. The daily installments of escalating rhetoric looked exactly like what you would do if you were promoting the season premiere of a television show. Not what you would do if you were conducting a military operation with life and death consequences for millions of people. The people dying in this war are not television characters. The I-65 little girls killed in that elementary school were not extras in a production. The American soldiers who have died are not contestants eliminated in a dramatic reveal. War is the most serious thing a government can do because it produces irreversible consequences for real human beings who did not ask to be part of the narrative. And the man conducting it is approaching it with the instincts of a reality television producer. Obsessed with the reveal, the deadline, the meme, the truth social post time to mark it open. That instinct is not just aesthetically objectionable. It is strategically dangerous because adversaries who understand that your decision-making is shaped by ratings and narrative and audience response can exploit that understanding in ways that a commander shaped by genuine strategic calculation cannot be exploited. Iran has been watching Trump perform for months. They know the difference between the primetime deadline and the actual operational decision. And their patience, their willingness to absorb punishment while waiting for American political will to fracture against the economic consequences is the strategic counter to reality show warfare that no amount of Hollywood production value can overcome. Here's the bottom line. Trump promised no new Middle Eastern wars. He got $300 million from an Israeli citizen. Netanyahu visited 8 times and told him he would be a spectator to history. Rubio admitted America joined because Israel said it was going in anyway. Obama said no. Biden said no. Trump said yes. China and Pakistan have stated nuclear red lines connected to Israeli conduct. America is spending $1 to $2 billion a day while China watches and accumulates strategic advantage. The war is being produced like The Apprentice with primetime deadlines and Hollywood videos. And the people paying for the production are the working-class families at the pump, the soldiers being deployed, the communities absorbing the economic shock waves, and the 165 little girls who did not survive the opening episode. Lucas Speaks will keep saying that until the ratings finally go down on this particular show. Hit that like button right now. Share this video because the reality show Warfare Observation needs to reach every American who is still waiting for the 8 p.m. Eastern reveal. Subscribe to Lucas Speaks and turn on your notifications. We are not done and we're just getting started.